Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Great. Today, we're taking a look at immunohistochemistry, IHC for short.
Ah, IHC.
It's pretty amazing stuff, really changing how we see and understand diseases, actually visualizing them.
Yeah, you could say that, like giving microscopes superpowers. So we
Mm.
can highlight specific proteins, within cells and tissues.
It's almost like we're, what's the word?
Illuminating.
Illuminating, yes, that's
Yeah,
it, like shining a light on these tiny protein markers, the ones that can tell us so much about what's going on.
right.
And to guide our deep dive today, we have a fantastic article from Assay Genie. It's called The Importance of Immunohistochemistry Training in Modern Scientific Research.
Great article. Really
Mm.
highlights the skill involved.
It does. It made me think about this story I read recently about a patient whose cancer diagnosis was completely changed because of IHC.
Oh, yeah, I think I read that one too. Where they initially thought it was one type of cancer, but then IHC revealed a totally different subtype.
That's the one.
Yeah,
And it required a completely different treatment approach.
exactly. It's amazing how IHC can have such a direct impact, on patient care.
It really is. So for our listeners who might not be super familiar with the science, how does IHC actually work? Like, what's happening at the molecular level?
Okay, well, imagine this. Your immune system is like a security team, always on the lookout for intruders, and these intruders are called antigens.
Okay, so antigens, those are the bad guys.
You got it. And to fight them off, your body produces antibodies, these amazing little defenders.
Ah, antibodies.
Yes, and each antibody is designed to target a specific antigen, kind of like a lock and key.
Each antibody has its own specific enemy to fight.
Precisely. And that's where IHC comes in. Scientists have figured out how to harness this lock and key system to actually visualize those proteins in tissue samples.
It's like giving those antibodies a little flashlight so we can see exactly where they're going and what they're attaching to.
Huh. I love that. It's a great analogy. And, they actually do attach dyes or markers to the antibodies, which lets us see them under a microscope.
So those microscopic images, they're not just in black and white. We can actually see these proteins in different colors.
Absolutely. It's a whole hidden world bursting with color.
Wow.
And each color tells us something different. It's like a code telling us what type of cells are present, whether they're healthy or not, and even what specific proteins they're expressing.
Yeah, so it's not just about seeing the cells. It's about understanding what's going on inside them.
Exactly. And that's why IHC is so powerful, not just for research, but also for diagnosing and treating diseases. It gives us this incredible level of detail.
The article we're looking at today really emphasizes the training aspect of IHC. It's clearly not just a simple stain and look kind of technique.
Right. It's much more than that. To get good results from IHC, you need a deep understanding of the science behind it. And you need to know how to design your experiment carefully. Then comes the interpretation of the images, which can be tricky.
Otherwise, you could end up with misleading results.
Exactly. And that's why proper training programs are so crucial. They make sure researchers and clinicians have the knowledge and skills to use IHC effectively and responsibly.
What does a good IHC training program actually look like? What kind of things do people learn?
Well, it's a mix of theory and hands-on practice. You learn the fundamentals of immunology, different types of antibodies and antigens. You also learn how to choose the right ones for your research question.
I see.
But it's not all just, lectures and textbooks. You also get practical experience, preparing tissue samples, staining techniques, and operating all sorts of microscopes.
Sounds pretty comprehensive.
It has to be. And it's always evolving as new technology comes out. For example, there's a lot of focus now on digital pathology,
Yeah.
where those microscopic images are, digitized. And then, well, that opens up a whole new world of analysis, even using things like artificial intelligence.
AI and IHC. Now that's something I'm really curious about. It sounds futuristic.
It is pretty incredible. Think about it. AI could analyze thousands of IHC images in a fraction of the time it would take a human, and maybe even with greater accuracy.
Wow, that would be huge, especially for something like cancer diagnosis, where time is so critical.
Absolutely. And it's not just about speed. AI can help us spot patterns that a human might miss, even really experienced pathologists.
It's like having an extra set of superpowered eyes, helping to make sure the diagnosis is as accurate as possible.
Exactly. And as AI technology continues to advance, well, the possibilities are really exciting. More precise diagnoses, more personalized treatments, and hopefully better outcomes for patients.
This has been a fascinating look into IHC. From the tiny world of antibodies and antigens to the very real impact it has on patient care. And now, the potential of AI is adding a whole new dimension.
Agreed.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I think it's time to shift gears a bit and explore how IHC is being used in the real world, specifically for diagnosing diseases.
Let's do it. We can delve into some of the specific biomarkers that IHC can help us identify and what they tell us about a patient's condition.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so we've talked about the theory behind IHC, but you're probably wondering how it actually plays out in the real world, in a clinical setting.
Yeah, that's a good point. We've covered the science, but how does IHC really make a difference for patients?
Well, let's say a patient comes in with a suspected cancer. First, they'll take a biopsy, send it to the lab to be processed and prepped for IHC, and then the real detective work begins. They have to choose the right antibodies.
So there's no, universal antibody.
Nope, not at all. It's very targeted. It all depends on the suspected type of cancer. For example, with breast cancer, they might look for a protein called HER2.
Oh, HER2. I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's been in the news a lot. There are actually therapies designed to target HER2 positive breast cancers. So knowing the HER2 status is super important. It helps doctors decide on the best treatment plan.
Wow, so IHC isn't just about confirming a diagnosis, it's about guiding treatment decisions too.
Exactly. It's all about personalized care, giving each patient the most effective treatment possible. It's not just for cancer. IHC is used to diagnose a whole bunch of diseases, autoimmune disorders, infectious diseases, you name it.
So it's pretty versatile, but are there any limitations with IHC?
Well, like any technique, there are nuances. The
Wow.
quality of the sample is super important, and the antibodies have to be specific. Even the interpretation of the staining patterns can affect the accuracy.
So it sounds like the skill of the people involved, those who are actually doing the IHC and interpreting the results, that plays a big role.
Absolutely, and that's why training and standardization are so important. And of course, new technologies are always emerging. Things like digital pathology and AI. That's really changing the game.
Right. We touched on AI earlier. I'm really curious to hear more about how it's being used in IHC and what it means for the future of diagnostics.
Well, imagine this. Instead of a pathologist having to manually examine hundreds of slides, an AI algorithm could analyze those digital images in a fraction of the time.
And probably wouldn't get tired.
Haha, exactly. It could work 24/7 analyzing those images, and it might even be able to detect patterns that a human could miss, even subtle ones.
So AI could actually help make IHC even more accurate.
That's the idea. AI algorithms can be trained on huge data sets of IHC images. They can learn to recognize complex patterns and differentiate between different variations, even those that might be tricky for a human to spot.
That's pretty reassuring, especially for patients who are waiting for a diagnosis.
It is. And as AI technology keeps advancing, it's really going to revolutionize IHC. Faster diagnoses, more personalized treatments, and ultimately better outcomes for patients.
This has been an incredible journey so far. We've really explored the ins and outs of IHC, from the basics of antibodies and antigens to how it's used in real-world diagnostics. And now we're seeing how AI is adding a whole new layer of possibilities.
Right. We've covered a lot.
But I think there's one more crucial aspect we need to discuss: the global impact of IHC. What does it mean for accessibility and equity in healthcare?
That's a really important point. We can't talk about advances in healthcare without talking about access. Let's dive into that.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it. A technique like IHC, with all this intricate science and technology, can actually have a real impact on healthcare around the world.
It really shows you the power of science, how it can actually change people's lives everywhere.
It does. But it's important to remember that not everyone has equal access to healthcare, especially these more specialized diagnostics like IHC.
That's a crucial point. There are lots of places, especially in low and middle income countries, where access to IHC testing is limited for all sorts of reasons, really. Infrastructure, cost, lack of trained personnel.
So even though we have this incredible technology, it can't reach everyone who needs it.
Unfortunately, that's the case. And that disparity, it really affects healthcare outcomes. Imagine someone in a remote village who might have cancer, but they can't get IHC testing. That delay in diagnosis could be devastating.
That's a really sobering thought. It makes you realize that scientific progress isn't enough on its own. We need to make sure these advancements are accessible to everyone, no matter where they live or their economic situation.
I completely agree. And there are organizations and initiatives trying to address this. Some are focused on training healthcare professionals in developing countries. Others are trying to make IHC technology more affordable and accessible in places with limited resources.
It's good to know that people are working on this. It shows how important it is to think globally when it comes to healthcare, to collaborate and share knowledge and resources.
Absolutely. We're all in this together, right? Advancements in one part of the world should benefit everyone.
Well said. This deep dive has been really eye-opening, not just in terms of the science behind IHC, but also its global impact. We've seen how it works at the molecular level with those amazing antibodies and antigens, and how it's being used to diagnose diseases and make treatment decisions. And of course, the role of AI is just incredible.
It's all connected, isn't it?
It is. IHC is clearly a powerful tool. It has the potential to revolutionize healthcare as we know it. But it's up to all of us to make sure that potential is realized. For everyone.
I think that's the key takeaway. The future of IHC is exciting, but we need to actively shape that future. We need to make sure it's a future where everyone benefits from these advances in healthcare, a future where everyone has the chance to live a healthier life.
Beautifully said. We hope this deep dive into the world of immunohistochemistry has sparked your curiosity and maybe inspired you to learn even more. Remember, the quest for knowledge is a journey we take together, and it's a journey that can lead us to a brighter and healthier future for all. Thanks for joining us.